whether that falls within the town charter document, whether it's something that we feel is comfortable where they're currently kept.
Having just kind of gone through this with the police commission, and still going through it actually, and trying to define the roles and responsibilities of a police commission member. We developed, based on advice from the town's attorney, we developed bylaws for the police commission that delineates roles and responsibilities for that commission. I don't know that it belongs in the charter. I think it might, I would like to see better, like you said, a more concise definition for each board. You would never be able to put all the responsibilities and roles, let's say, for the Board of Education into that document. You wouldn't be able to be complete.
I think just a basic information about what that board does and let
Yes.
people know what they do, certainly not their bylaws, because they're going to change that depending on the group and whatever's going on, but a definition so that they know if they have a question about a certain board, they know who to go to.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Some of the boards in the charter, I feel like right now have
Pretty good, yeah.
but not all of them.
Yeah.
I do feel that some of the board and commission names are somewhat self-explanatory in that we are by state statute compelled to establish certain boards and commissions. One of the things to consider in my thought process on this is, of course, it would need to be across the board, right? You would need to have whatever verbiage you're lending to the descriptions, you're going to need to apply to all the boards and commissions, which is just something to keep it consistent. But I also feel that there is a lot where things already have been made mention in state statutes. Previous experience tells me that there's been this inclination to stay away from repeating descriptions. I don't think that takes away from the merit of putting a description in the town charter, why it's there, perhaps citing the state statute for why it exists,
Yeah.
to mention a previous suggestion. But it is something that we would want to see a full red line copy of, because I think when you start trying to objectively describe the function of these boards, the scope of these boards and what they do does change from time to time. And you would want there to be a pretty thorough vetting process and agreement on how you're going to describe those boards and the brief synopsis of their function in town as well. I know for your Board of Finance, for example, there's certain functions that could be understood to be very different based on how you're going to word what they exist to do, right? And is that going to then create a separate series of challenges in trying to get either through a referendum everybody to agree on what the definition of the Board of Finance would be? Just as a thought exercise, putting that out there where you're going to have to do that across all of the boards and commissions, which might be very, very simple and straightforward for 95% of them, might not be for the other 5.
Right. What I was thinking is along those same lines, Matt, is that probably like you said, about 90% of them are established per state statute. You could say, and the roles and responsibilities are somewhat laid out in those statutes. But I think just saying, if we wanted to have consistency for all boards and commissions, to say, Board of Finance is established per Connecticut general statutes, and here they are. And in that case, I think listing the statute numbers is fine, because those are pretty long-standing statutes, and they don't tend to change greatly. Board of Ed, same thing. Police Commission, same thing. You're going to have a statute to back up why that Board of Commission exists.
Whereas your pension board and your other boards wouldn't necessarily.
They're all pretty much.
Based on that discussion, it does seem like a fairly large effort. I think what you're describing is some of the homework and doing a lot of editing. Is that something that this commission wants to, are we working on de-scoping things as well? Is there a time frame for when we're going to kind of work through that as a team?
Well, our current time frame for both those Board of Selectmen suggested changes and the additional changes is the process for us culminates in mid-December. So we have about a month and a half, a little over a month and a half. And we have this meeting, we have a regular meeting at the end of November, and that will be the meeting where we look to add things to a draft report for our third public hearing in December. And then there's a meeting a week after that to finalize that to a final draft report based on final input. So we're on we don't have a whole lot of runway left in terms of time and number of meetings for what the appointing authority, which is the Board of Selectmen, set up for us.
So maybe
That is a consideration as well.
Yeah, so as I was going through these, and you were talking about, I was, trying to rank these in terms of probability for getting through, which are low-hanging fruit, and which have a complexity factor that maybe we don't want to head down so we can de-scope. It may be good to have a process that helps us filter down, and we can just
Which
go
was,
after it.
that specific point was also made mention of at the public hearing quite a few times, actually, just about short amount of time, the number of suggestions we already have in front of us, and making sure that those are well understood, are well parsed through, so that we're not leaving any stones unturned in what the potential impact, one way or another, could be on the direction of the question, both capability up or down.
And like the last one, you're talking about adding definitions, maybe reviewing and linking to state statutes. To me, that one's going to take some effort, right? It's not straightforward. It's something you have to go in there and pick each one and start doing that. As it stands now, what's the value aspect of it, right? It's there, it's tied in. The high value items are the ones that, we've already discussed. The one that brought us all here is highly important, right? So if we rank them and say, hey, there's a top 5, we're going in on them, right? We get a high probability that these are going to get voted yes. If we do our homework and we do our education up front for the community. So I want us to think about that, especially with this tight time frame. Because we could take this whole thing, tear it up, redline the whole thing.
Yeah, we had mentioned that before, that there's so many things on our plate that there's no way we're going to get it all done. There's just no way. So we take the priority and get those done.
So maybe we're going to do that on our own. Is that a suggestion? What's your thoughts, Matt?
As well, for how they're interpreting that potential change. And then for the additional suggestions, that's part of our deliberative process up here, is to discuss it as being added to that scope of work and what that might look like, because what we do is we go to the Board of Selectmen as well and ask for additional clarification. So things like the tax collector question, with the quarterly due dates, that came from public suggestion. The First Selectmen took that, brought that to the attorney to get something worded so we can see the mock-up of it.
Got it.
So if there is something that we feel very strongly that we want to add on to them, as we have already, then we want to be bringing that as a suggestion to the Board of Selectmen to say, can we get an attorney's opinion as far as what this change would look like, what the wording of the question would look like.
And our feedback relative to what the voter will see here, highly important based on what we say.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So when we get to the point of adding questions specifically to the draft report, which is the document that gets submitted, our recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, appointing authority for the commission to continue their leg of the process, to hold additional public hearings, to set a referendum date. That is where we would have the final wording of the question to vote on, to add to that draft report. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it part of the commission's responsibility as well? I mean, yes, to come up with a prioritized list of what we feel should be put forth to the voters at this time, but shouldn't we also have, if we're doing this work, we're going through things, we're hearing from people, shouldn't we have recommendations for further revision that we're not going to undertake as this commission?
That is certainly part of the process.
Yes.
As long as it, in my opinion, as long as it can be fairly supported and is discussed as to why we won't pursue it past a certain point.
Right, I mean,
think think that's
I mean,
that's
given,
part of the process.
like you said, given the short timeframe that we've had to work on this, I do feel like you said, Dan, that we have to prioritize and say, here's the ones that are highest impact, that really, but then these are also important and should be addressed at some point.
Right.
One of the things I would like to see us recommend is that charter revision be an ongoing commission, maybe not a permanent commission, but there has to be. I served on the Board of Education Policy Committee. There's a constant rotation of, I mean, granted, book policies is like this,
Yeah.
but there's a constant rotation of going through those policies and updating them. I think that the charter needs a similar approach in that it needs to be updated.
To that extent, I do know
Right.
that there is a rolling 5-year recommendation, I think,
Yeah.
for having a charter revision commission. Look at any proposed changes. I don't know if it's necessarily a requirement. I'd have to confirm that, but it is
Yeah.
somewhere in the general statutes, I believe, about that. And
Okay.
we've obviously had many more than one over the last 5 years. So that being said, there are additional ways to form a charter revision commission as well. It doesn't mean it's not necessarily the board of selectmen. It can, my understanding is it can be petitioned into existence as well through that town meeting
Yes.
legislative body.
Yeah.
Matt, can we go back and look at 11 again? I'm just reading it again, and it says, shall the tax due dates change to be sent out quarterly? Now, they're not going to be sent out quarterly, they're going to only be sent out once, but wouldn't it be better to have it payable quarterly? Because the bills are only going to go out once in July.
And I understand what you're
Yeah.
asking. Yeah, that would be a rewording point for sure. Yeah.
That way it's less confusing, because they're going to be
It's-
looking for
because-
full bills and they're not
The
getting.
question is, shall the tax due dates be quarterly?
Yeah.
Rather than,
Payable quarterly.
right.
Yeah.
It's changed to
Then the other two that I wanted to speak to real quickly, just to, we've had it suggested a couple of times for consideration, expanding the board of selectmen to 5 members. I'm sure what everybody's thoughts might be on that.
I think we discussed this before, and there were monetary issues with having board of selectmen. I think, 5 members, that was something that was brought up, previous charters. So that would be a big one. How do you, if you compensate having 5, I mean,
I know the suggestions were made in the spirit of wanting additional representation
right, yeah.
for the town, that as a 3-member board currently, it seems that we have, obviously your majority in an ascension vote ends up being 2-1 most of the time. It doesn't exactly seem to be the most, I'll call it a lengthy discussion. If you know going in, it's a 2-to-1 dynamic. These are things that I've heard it described as. I've been sympathetic to the idea previously, because I do think that having additional representation on there could be beneficial. I do think though that it's a simple question, but the impact and the importance of it is far greater than the suggestion alone implies, where we have, you're talking about 2 additional members on your board, and there's a lot that goes through the board of selectmen.
It's a lot more complicated than.
There's the seating of the board of selectmen as well. There's some other facets of it I think that would also need to be considered. I would think at the same time. So that's some of the additional detail from my view on that issue. I'm not sure if this falls within anybody else's scope of interest to pursue. I do think that it's something that is very significant and its impact to the town. I would remind everybody as well that we make the suggestions, and the Board of Selectmen can approve select recommendations. They may not approve all of them. My understanding from previous conversations, previous commissions that I sat on was the consensus was against the idea of expanding the Board of Selectmen. As it is, I think two-thirds of that Board of Selectmen are still seated. I'm not sure if their opinions may have changed since that time, but I would just put that out there for consideration as well. Any other thoughts? Anybody like to contribute?
I think that's again, pulling stuff out of scope, that's a pretty big one. And I guess, I probably want to see a little more research in towns of our size and that's work effectively.
Like I said, I think it's a lot more complicated than
Yeah.
what it appears,
Well, when you change
So too.
the whole thing.
that, the ripple effect of other parts of the charter that would need to change.
Sure.
Any other thoughts? Before moving on to public comment, I do just want to clarify one suggestion that was made by Colin previously. I know you had suggested the idea of an alternate on the police commission. That may have been the last time we actually discussed it at length. I'm not sure that there's been a point where the police commission couldn't meet due to lack of quorum, or whether that was a frequent occurrence, that we
No.
get the need for an alternate member to be seated.
No, we have not had that issue. The suggestion was given to me by other members of the commission. That they noted that other boards and commissions have alternates. Police commission is the only one that doesn't.
Board of Education doesn't have alternates.
Board of Ed does not.
It's
9 members.
Had 9 members, yeah.
Yeah.
That's, well, of course, selectmen isn't alternates.
We had 5, but maybe one.
Yes.
And then, just to speak to it, I know we've mentioned this one a few times, but the Ethics Commission review, I did get an opportunity to sink my teeth into that a little bit further. The code of ethics that we receive when we're appointed or elected to an office, that does function both as the code of ethics, but also as the bylaws of the Ethics Commission. I know specifically one of the concerns was looking for separation of power as far as the appointing authority for members of the commission. I couldn't really find a better or different way for handling appointments to the commission. That's my efforts, but also that the other big question was about quorum on the commission. And quorum is something that the Ethics Commission can set by themselves. They have a quorum of 4 out of 5. There are other ethics commissions in the town, in the state that operate at a quorum level. That's something that they can change, and if they were to make such a change, obviously they would need the membership initially to meet and to have quorum. But when that would change, that would go to the Board of Selectmen for approval, and that would constitute your new code of ethics document. That's my understanding of it. I did not see that as something that was for the town charter to present as a question of change. It seemed to be something that was within the scope of the Ethics Commission.
Do we currently see the Ethics Commission? We have a full commission for the ethics.
I believe we have 4 active members out of 5, so they meet all of their current active members. It is an appointed commission, so the first selectman or selectman will be making those appointments. And they meet quarterly until there is an issue for them.
Yeah.
Then I believe I would probably call a special meetings for how they get those. Anything from the commission that I may have missed as far as public suggestions that we want to speak to? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Please state your name, village residence. I don't think we'll have a need for a time cutoff given the current attendance, but your microphone is yours.
Ladies, I am totally in support
5-member board of selectmen. One of the things I'm finding very concerning is that every time we get a board of selectmen meeting, especially when it's close to an election year, the guy that's been voted out every time doesn't show up. So what are we paying for? Scott Gardner has not attended the board of selectmen meeting probably in the last 6 meetings, 7 meetings. Is he still receiving a paycheck? And why would he want to show up when every time he showed up for 2 straight years, it's pretty much been voted against? So this is where I don't think it's serving our community. We're talking about wasting money by paying for 2 additional, but aren't we wasting money for that one, no matter whether it's a majority of Republican or majority of Democrats? When the Dems were in the majority, it happened to our Republican representative. When the Republicans are the majority, it happens to the Dem that's in the minority. So it's not a fair representation on that board when that happens. So that's one of my objections. We're already wasting money, so why not waste more? Right? But at least let's represent the people, and give the people an opportunity to have a little bit more of a voice on that board, because that's not happening. It hasn't, and it hasn't been in years. I mean, I've been attending meetings since 2015, that's why I know. It doesn't matter who's in the power hold, it's just the third guy doesn't get a vote. He's out. So by the time his tenure or her tenure is just about over, they don't want to show up anymore. So that is a waste. I'm fully in support of quarterly payments on the taxes. I'm glad that one of the members, Ms. Hurley, and Matt, you covered that, the percentage for the taxes, because it is 17% daily if you are late on your taxes. So I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but that's how much you get charged, 17% for late fees. Trust me, I know. I've been late enough in my life. I struggle. I'm not ashamed of that.
Just to clarify, you're saying late fee is 17%?
The interest on a late tax payment is 17% per day. So that revenue that you're losing in the quarterly payments, just check on with Ms. Vincent how much of a risk that is for the revenue. Because it's a significant interest. So that's one of my other things. I do agree that from coming to the meetings and hearings, because you're on a time crunch, some of these are not practical. They require way too much work, way too much time. It should just be recommended that some of these should go to another commission for the full 18 months. Because Ms. Gaddy was right. The reason why we're even here today is because during budget season, our charter of 2019, the wording got messed up, nobody knows how, and the capital improvement was a problem. That's why we're here. These guys, you know it. When it hits social media and the public finds out that there's a problem, then everybody's like, let's get on it. So that's why we're here. The public is going to start finding out that only a 2-member board of selectmen is what's serving their town, because some of us are tired of that little representation. So that's why I was the resident that asked for the 5-member. You know it, Ms. Gaddy. You know it's a problem. You shouldn't even be sitting on that to make that decision. It's a conflict of interest. The rest of the board should be. I'm going to be very frank about that. Plus, we have an ethics commission that's appointed by our selectmen. They haven't been in action. Even when they are in action, what can they actually do? They don't have a lot of stretch. So that's going to need a lot of work. I agree with Ms. Lugaskis. This charter should be reviewed every 2 years. General statutes, we're supposed to be following the 99 of the municipal government. I mean, we're already, our hands are tied in some of our charter with what the state says we have to and don't have to do. I mean, look at P&Z with the exemption. So there's a lot of room where the charter should be being improved. Should have been happening all along. It's not anybody's fault that we're this far behind the 8 ball. It's everybody's fault, because we don't really look at this. And we don't like to always take the hardline approach to it. So for me, if the charter was a problem because the language got changed, and then we're going to go into a crunch time, Just narrow it down to 3 or 4 questions. And most people do not in the town know the charter is even available. And bylaws, I went to the town clerk for the Board of Finance bylaws, she goes, I don't know where they are. They were in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet. Where are the minutes of it? Where are the agendas? Can't find them, they don't exist. So how did those bylaws even get drafted? So is that going to end up becoming a problem in the future? So there's a lot of missteps. So I would prefer to see, yes, the questions narrowed down, because we're on a time crunch. So if we try to lengthen it, we're going to have more mistakes. Then we're going to have more problems for the residents in the future. It's just better to narrow it down to 3 simple ones. The only reason why the capital improvement is even being flexed and focused on and a major priority is because the residents and the school had an issue because it was not separated. So they stacked the room to make sure their budget got pushed through. We need to clean it up or the school's going to have a problem at the next budget season. That's why we're here. It caused a lot of problems. So as a resident, as someone who's been playing in politics for the last 5-7 years, we're not here for the people right now. We're here to clean up the capital improvement so that the school, if they can stack the room, they get their budget passed. And the people are tired of town meeting forms of government because that's all that happens. We can't get enough support in the room because the people are just completely disenfranchised from this government. They are. If you talk to people, they don't know anything that's going on. I mean, look at the room. This is their form of government they're not even here to represent. It's frustrating. I feel bad for you guys. I really do. I feel bad for the people that live in this town that are caring, that do want to know, that are here repeatedly. Because we can't get our voices heard either unless we're talking to our neighbors and we work all day. So it's frustrating. So this charter and the state of Connecticut, as we've discussed, Mr. Reagan, they don't set it up for the people to really have a voice. Because if they did, why does the selectmen appoint the charter commission? Why does the selectmen get all of the suggestions and the priority? And that charter is supposed to be the legislative body's people form of government. And we're not going to get the top say on those questions. Because if we were, better representation on our Board of Selectmen, so we had a bigger board and more voice from the people. Referendum for a town meeting vote. I mean, this town referendum stuff, this has been a problem going back to since Mr. Sweet was in office. That's why there was a petition that went to court, because the people were tired of the town meetings getting stacked. So yeah, please make that the #1. Please make that the #1 change in our charter. #2, yeah, clean up the capital plan, because here's the problem. Our annual budget and our capital plan can be done any way we want. I spoke with Ms. Vachon. LoCIT money is going into our annual budget when it could be put in a set-aside fund and earmarking for our 1-year budget. We can have a 5-year wish list, but the one current fiscal year, we could be having a much better capital improvement plan with a lot more transparency of what money's coming in, where the money's going, how it's being spent. I have to wait until before an election to find out half the plans or half of the projects that are going on in town if I don't come to these meetings, because I can't take a budget, an annual budget, and I can't take a capital plan and actually really, if I'm just an everyday resident not coming, figure out what's going on in that. So there's cleanup even there. The capital plan should be a 5-year plan of how this town is moving forward to get projects done. The money should be explained to the residents. What money is available? What grants are going to be being applied for? What are we going to have in 1 year being done that we're actually voting on? The residents are completely, they don't understand what they're even voting on. And I can tell you other towns do not call their capital plans a Christmas wish list. They're very effective and keeping up with how they earmark their money, how they apply for their grants, how they actually budget for the one fiscal year for their projects to be done, so their residents know what's going on. That's not what's going on, so that's where our charter needs a lot of cleanup. And a few months to get it done is just not going to be enough.
Thank you.
And the other part I have a problem with is the definition of the boards. Are we having bylaws? Are we having ordinances? Or are we having a description in the charter? Because we have ordinances that already establish what our board's power is. Our charter already says what some of our board's powers are. So again, I'm not even sure why that's being reviewed. As a resident, civil preparedness, if we don't have that, and let's say we have a major crisis, are we then liable for the town, on the town end? If people get injured, if people don't get evacuated quick enough? Hell no. Because we don't have, even you guys right now, we don't have enough answers. Clarification on the state statute. One of my biggest concerns right now for this charter commission is the referendum. We all want a referendum, but the state statute clearly states you have to have one annual town meeting. That's by the legislative body. If you go to referendum, are you removing the power of the legislative body? And I asked this. I asked it on the previous meetings, and I asked it in the public hearing. Mr. Cunningham really needs to get clarification from the town attorney on that.
My understanding is because we have an annual town meeting established to be held annually, that would function as your, I'll call it your backstop, one required minimum annual town meeting, which would retain that town meeting legislative body style of government. That's my understanding of it. So we do have that in the charter. The specific section escapes me, but I know that that is in there as the primary, and that's where business can be brought up by the public, right? And we haven't currently delineated to have the auditor's report get ready. We have the annual report that gets presented, but there's other business that can be brought before that assembly as well, because that's what it is. It's the annual town meeting. The legislative body would be
And my thing is, certainly, what this town charter is supposed to be, the government for our town. Negating the fact that the state statute overrides it. If we want to put something in our charter that says every 2 years, the board has to be appointed to review the charter. You guys have a right to put that as a suggestion on that ballot. People have a right to see that. Why you keep getting no's is because some of this stuff people do not see significant enough to their everyday. But when you ask them, do they want a town referendum, they'll say yeah, because they stacked the room. That's our government. So it's causing an us against them constantly. I've watched it every year. The people want to be heard. You want people to get engaged. You want people to have more apathy. You have to figure out a way, is our charter going to start working for the people to make people want to be part of it? If we keep disenfranchising our community, they're not going to get involved. And why don't our registrars send out emails before votes? People have the right to put an email on their voter registry card. We could set up a whole email thing. We already have a text alert. Again, why can't we do that? If we're going to have town votes, it could go out through an email. I mean, I requested a policy last Thursday, just to see a policy. I'm still waiting. Talking about bylaws for boards. We'll be waiting on those. But we won't know where to find those. So ordinances and charters seem to be the two that always stay in place.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your work. And in fact, there is no one in this room. It's sad.
Robert Smith, Plainfield, going back to the capital improvement versus the operating. Chapter 10 does state that it's not actuated capital improvement is not actually until it's actually put in the operating budget. So how can you vote on an operating budget if the capital improvement fails? So that automatically kills the operating budget, correct? You have to include part of your capital improvement into the operating budget before it's voted on to have it actually.
Right, I think.
The failure of the capital improvement to pass will kill your operating budget.
And I think my understanding of it, as far as verifying the wording, was just that, where things that are being presented at the annual town budget meeting, as it currently is written, we want to make sure that how we define that town budget is clear, to make sure that it's consistent, because we're looking at how we define the capital program in the charter, what we're going to change the term to, or how it's going to be referenced, to make sure that how that impacts other definitions of town process is also equally understood. So if we define the operating budget as consisting of those three pieces, then obviously that's something that needs to be addressed and that we will be watching through these proposed changes. And if it's, if it goes in a different direction, then we have to make a note of that as well.
It seems like it's a 5-year capital improvement plan. That should actually be passed before finance. First, that's right. Then that year one, brought in and put in the budget. So before budget season starts, a capital improvement plan has already been voted on or approved by the board of finance. So now you have your capital improvement, you have your year one, then you add that into the budget, or you vote on as an operating budget. And that just ends that, so then the town really don't have to vote on an operating.
And I know we have spoken about this previously as well, and my understanding of it is, capital projects that are part of your operating budget would be in that, either the school or the town budget as presented and voted on. Your 5-year capital plan or the capital budget that we're referring to here would be what you don't know that you'll have the funding for based on state grant eligibility or state grant availability. But that, in a year one, that would be the year you'd be looking to do it, so you could demonstrate it once approved as supplemental information as part of your grant application process. That's my understanding of those pieces work together.
Right, but going back to saying that if capital improvement does fail, that kills your operating budget or your school budget this time.
Which, depending on how you define
So you can't say
that process.
We vote on them all separate, and one carries by itself, because now capital improvement cannot carry itself. It would affect the operating budget. That's it.
Which is why the question would be put forward, right? To say, are these going to be voted and passed on individually, based on how the questions are presented at a referendum?
Yeah, my point is, though, once you put part of the capital improvement on that year of operating budget, but then it fails, the capital improvement, the operating budget can't pass.
Again, that goes back to how it's all defined, and that's what we're looking at through the red line drafts, to make sure that everything is lining up in a consistent and clear manner as well, so that the situation you're describing isn't something that occurs.
Correct, it sounds like almost the same thing you got now.
Correct, and that's a big part of why we're up here to change that. Anyone else for public comment?
Absolutely. Art Gagnon. I'm going to start from where you left off and go backwards, okay? Ethics Commission, you mentioned a quorum. Not only a quorum, but Ethics Commission needs a unanimous 5-member vote to move anything. So we do need members to the Ethics Commission to even convene. We don't have members. So we need to push.
For action or just to hold the meeting?
No, for action. You need a quorum, you need the quorum, which we can't get still because we need members. But they actually need the unanimous, they need 5 members to vote to move something. They all have to be yes votes to move it, the question. So I just wanted to put that out so you know that. We do need them. We need members to that. Multiple boards, commissions, we need members, so. To Colleen's suggestion on the alternates, have you checked the general statutes on police commission alternates? Is there anything
It doesn't.
in the general
statute
statute?
doesn't on the board or maybe that it basically the statute, the one or two statutes that actually that I've read about Board of Police Commissioner, more about what your role is and what your responsibility is as a commissioner.
Okay, so
It
that
really
would,
didn't define the Board of Police Commission itself.
that would be something to check into, if it's even allowable or whatever. The 5-member Board of Selectmen. Being on the majority, I would love to see a 5-member Board of Selectmen because minority representation is 1 on a 5-member board. So to have 4 of a majority, I'd love it, but I don't want to see this. I really don't. The money perspective, the getting a quorum perspective, I don't think it's a good idea. The 4-to-1 perspective ratio, it doesn't add representation. It could actually take it away. So that's my take on that. For calling 11-7 is the review of the amendments, review and amendment of the charter that states in that, how that's done. You had brought that up. It's clear how it's done. If you wanted to change, if you wanted to make a charter revision appointed, you would have to change 11-7 completely because that states how it's done. So that would all have to be changed. Naomi mentioned that the ordinances do state what the boards and commissions are and do. Some of them do. I don't think they all do, but again, you could check into that.
Well, right, because how long have they been neglected too?
I'm getting to that. There's one, the pension board would have to be, you had asked, that would have to be looked at because that was 1970 and it's updated. Since that retirement plan was put in place, the retirement plan has ended in 2018. But still, there is no mention of how a pension board or what our current pension board looks like. So we do have to address that in the ordinances. You mentioned something about town meeting. Town meeting is annual town meeting is 2-3. Annual town budget meeting is 2-4. They're different.
Yep.
So just wanted that clarified. Also, I have a question about the tax collector, changing the dates on the tax collector. Why would that be? I can understand the
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was writing.
the change in the date for the tax collector,
Their term.
appointing them at their term. So why the tax collector? I can understand the town clerk has to swear people in, so they need to stay on longer so that they can swear these people in November, December.
It's just
Well, why-
continuity.
I know that,
It doesn't break everything up, and everybody's got to move out instantaneously. It just works out better to have them wait until January when the new year starts.
my understanding was that there would be the opportunity for some transfer period where you have an incoming, if you had an outgoing incumbent,
Okay.
that you could be providing some kind of training or transition period.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that rationale for the tax collector specifically, I'm not aware of any demonstrated need for that. I know that there's a general statute that spells it out, includes town clerk and tax collector as part of other positions within your town government that would be subject to such a term if it is an elected office.
So town clerk, I can understand, like I said. Now, tax collector, once the tax collector is elected, they get sworn in that month, okay? And then they're not going to take their duties until January?
My understanding of it would be you would be sworn in at a later date
Yeah, I would look into that one with the tax collector.
by your town clerk potentially too. That's a very good question.
Art, can I chime in here for a minute, Jim? Is there anything?
Art, if you don't mind
Can
your
I just add
opining.
something to that question?
I don't care.
With the sworn in, is there a statutory date for how long before they have to be sworn in? Do you know that?
I'd have to check. Jim's
You'd have to check that in.
statute.
The other thing, you know, paying them.
And as far as the timing you have, we started your Charter Revision Commission on July 24th, so that you would have the required 16 months till next general election, okay? If we don't get it done by spring, or if we decide the people can wait on this budget question, we'd rather bring it to the general election where more people are voting, we're not going to get the 1,800 in the spring. We have that ability to do that, to run it the whole 16-month course to next election. Just so you know, that's there. Also, the tax collector, how much time would they need? You said you want to, if we pass it in spring, you start them in July. Is that enough time for them to get organized for that? You'd have to ask the tax collector, do they need more time to get paperwork or whatnot? And I think that's the only questions I had.
A comment regarding the tax collector and the town clerk. The other thing that, when you brought that up, Art, as far as people being, there to help a transition, that's a budgetary item as well, because if we're paying two people in the same position at the same time, if we're doing that for November and December, that's a chunk of change.
It may be, if I may, that it may be limited to that one-time adjustment. I'm trying to picture in my head where you would have, if elected to that, if the change went through, and you had the 4 years, you would have that one period where you would probably end up having to pay for additional time because whoever's there, if you had an outgoing,
If you had
an outgoing incumbent, then you would end up having to appropriate
So that's-
additional funds.
yes,
likely,
exactly.
right? But that seemed, to me, my understanding, that would change past that next cycle, because then whoever you have in that seat, their term would be going up until whenever the possible next one would be starting.
But that would not allow for the transition, in the sense of, unless the incoming person is willing to give their time.
Right, if someone's gonna volunteer.
And not everybody's gonna
Right, would you
give their time.
pay someone to learn for
Yeah.
free? Right.
Yeah.
Any other public comment?
Should we schedule a special meeting? Our next meeting's not until a month, November 21st. Could we schedule a special meeting to get the questions, weed through the questions and have the ones that we want to do a final draft on at a November 21st meeting?
We could certainly approach the issue of a special meeting. If we wish to discuss it at this meeting, because it is a regular meeting, we could add it onto the agenda for discussion. Also, special meetings can be convened without a board vote or a commission vote, is my understanding. So, I'll look for a motion to add discussion and action regarding a special meeting to the agenda.
Second.
Motion has been made by Lynn Desjardins, seconded by Colleen. All in favor? All right. I'm sorry, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Measure passes. So we will approach that item now after public comment. Anyone else, public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is discussion and action regarding a potential special meeting. So, as far as special meetings go, I know I have a calendar on here somewhere. So one option is that we could approach any questions we have as reaching out directly to the selectmen. You can reach out to myself as the chair. I'm just looking for, I had a calendar of the month of November and December. Kicking around out here somewhere. Oh, here it is. Yep, from previous discussions. So we do have an upcoming, election day is November 7th. Monday the 6th on the town calendar in November does not have any meetings noted. Thursday the 9th of November does not have any meetings noted. And then, of course, we have our November 21st Charter Revision Commission a couple of weeks following that. I'd imagine that's the timeframe you would potentially be looking for a special meeting.
Right, something in between.
Do we feel that a special meeting would be needed for additional work on both the questions and the red line draft?
Can you just clarify something for a second? I think if we think about, okay, what do we want to have ready for the next meeting? And do we want everybody come in with prioritizing these ideas and discuss that? And any changes to, the wording on the questions? And to look at the red line document. I think we want to do all those things. I don't know about the rest of you, but November 21st is plenty soon for me.
I personally, I feel comfortable going through the documents. We did receive them yesterday, so, understandably, it is a short time frame to hear. We do have another meeting. It is a month from now, but that does not mean that you cannot reach out with questions. The benefit, obviously, of deliberating as a group is there. But I don't know that we have a great number of dates to select from.
All the ones you
I
mentioned,
don't
there
have
were.
dates.
Okay, so
That's my understanding. I don't think it's-
it is a consideration to whether there is availability amongst the membership on those
I
two
just don't
dates.
have time. You can have a meeting if you want. I just don't have time.
Okay. Personally, I'm comfortable with the next meeting being November 21st. I don't have a problem reaching out to membership and discussing questions and reaching out to the board of selectmen for clarification. You can certainly reach out individually. And of course, I would have the agenda put together and any supplemental material at least a week before that 21st meeting. That's been the cadence that I've tried to stick to. And other important information I've asked the first selectman to distribute directly when it's been made available.
We come in on the 21st with the suggested homework that Colleen has suggested.
So I would suggest, your homework would consist of looking at the questions as suggested, cleaning them up as you feel would best reflect the sought change. If you have additional questions regarding that, what the changes would look like, reaching out to myself or the first selectman.
The wording, he has to run that by the attorney.
The attorney ultimately will be looking at the wording on that as well. So, that's not us so much constructing the question, the wording of the
I
question.
think the wording that we should be thinking about is what's our desired outcome, so that.
And to ensure that it's a yes or no question that's presented.
Yes, it has to be a yes or no.
So so you can't have a negative motion. So if no action is to be taken, I'll just look for any motion to add a special meeting, and if there is no motion to be made, then there will be silence. Is there a motion for an additional special meeting? Hearing none, I will consider the matter settled. Next, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
Is that Cheryl?
Yep.
Sure. I'll second.
Second by June. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Measure passes.